Welcome back to Real Estate Investing with Alex Deacon. Another special edition property management episode tying in with MACE Property Management.
The trilogy.
This is the trilogy.
Yes.
We will be calling this the Holy Trinity of late February, early March. That's what we'll call it. So, guys, this is being brought to you by Deacon Hoover Real Estate and MACE Property Management. Make sure you're checking us out online, on Facebook, on Twitter. Search for us on Apple Podcasts, on Google Podcasts. Check for us on Spreaker. If you have a favorite podcast system that you use, type in Deacon Hoover. You will probably find not only this podcast, but the Realtor Nation with Ian Hoover. So, today, Mr. Deacon.
Yes.
It seems like we have talked about when it comes to property management. First, we've talked about what is property management. Then we talked about finding new tenants. Today, let's talk about problem tenants.
Yeah, we could talk about property management, problem tenants, or just how to interact, with our tenants.
Okay.
We'll focus on when a problem arises, what's next, what rights do you have, when you need to step back and when you can step forward. The way leases are written, a lot of new people to the business think because your lease says one thing that's the way it is, and that's not the way it is. It really depends on the particular situation. It depends on how much that tenant knows about their rights. It can get crazy when you have a magistrate that when you go in front of, he's pro-tenant, and there are magistrates that literally don't follow the law, but there's nothing you can do about it, and then all you can do is appeal and take it to a different court level. But when you're doing that, it's just costing you months and months of rent. So we'll just touch on all the things that come after you put a tenant in your property and what a property management company does behind the scenes that you typically don't see. Mm-hmm. So an average landlord will be able to learn from this if they want to manage their own properties. And one of my potential clients who would tune in to listen to this will kind of get an idea of what goes on behind the scenes when your tenant is in place.
Gotcha. All right, so let's see. So, but a first bullet point that I want to take from that, though, is it seems like be very aware that leases are almost malleable, and so even though they are, it is a contract. It sounds like they're because of rights. We're going to get into this, but between rights and between knowledge, leases can be somewhat malleable at times. Yeah,
I remember an attorney that I used to use a lot. He would say, legally speaking, these are your rights, right? Legally, this is what's going to happen, or could happen. Practically speaking, this is like the real world experience of how it works. Practically speaking, it might be better to work with this tenant and work something out. Right. So we'll talk about how we treat our tenants, and how I like to treat all of our tenants and anybody who wants to potentially rent from us is fair. Treat everybody the same. Treat them fair, but you also have to be firm. And I think the challenge is, as a landlord, not knowing what fair is and not knowing what firm is. You can be overly aggressive with your tenant, and you can be underly aggressive. So you have to know where that line is. So once you get a tenant in and they have just your typical problems, you need to take care of them quickly. So, for example, when we get a tenant who moves in, and let's just pick on a tenant who knows how to do nothing, right? Can't tighten a screw, can't even lift a finger. And you think to yourself, well, this is kind of silly. Why am I going over to fix their broken paper towel holder?
Right.
Sometimes you need to take care of some things initially, when they just first moved in. And then sometimes you're going to have tenants that they just call for every little thing. You need to know where to put your foot down, okay? In our lease, I think it states that we'll pay, or you're responsible up to the first $50 for small repairs. So, we're not going to come out and have somebody fix the toilet roll dispenser holder.
No?
Because, we're not going to have somebody come out and tighten the screen door closer. You know how the closers might... But, again, you have to take care of your tenants too, because you don't want a little small problem to turn into a big problem. Because you don't take care of this problem, you don't take care of that problem. Then the tenants start looking for problems. Then they start finding problems. I just had an email come across a half an hour ago, and the tenant sent me an email and said, "Hey, who do I speak to? I just had a mold test done in my house, and the levels are really high." That could turn out to be a grand disaster.
Right.
So I sent it over to the property manager and sent it to the owner, and they're going to have to figure it out.
Now,
but when that happens, as an owner, you better be taking care of that, or you give that tenant notice, "Hey, we're going to let you out of your lease because we want to take care of this after you're gone."
Now, is this something that, obviously with the tenants, you want to be fair but firm, and I hate to say that you want to treat people differently, because you ideally want to treat everybody the same. But are there instances, like you said, you don't necessarily want to go over to tighten screws if it's maybe somebody that is disabled, or maybe it's like we talked about the older elderly lady or the man or the woman that just really can't do it. Are those like exceptions that maybe to the rules that just if they've been a tenant for 5 to 10 years and stuff? Are there are there always exceptions to the rules?
There are exceptions for little things like that. If you're a great tenant and you always pay on time and you're just polite and courteous, but you're a little needy, then we try to serve. We try to accommodate. It's a balancing act. It's very hard business to keep the owner happy and the tenant happy, because the owner you're always spending too much money for the owner, and the tenant thinks that the owner's got endless amounts of money and is just the wealthiest person on the planet and can afford to fix everything. So to keep the tenant and the owner happy is super difficult. But that's the business we chose, so that's what we do. So when your tenant is maybe behind in their payments, I have tenants. I'll go to the opposite side of the spectrum, the complete other side. We have a tenant that's been a tenant for about 8 years. We've literally had to evict her about 8 times. Now, 8 times, I'm talking winning at the magistrate level, the eviction, and then after the eviction, there's a thing called possession. So after you win the eviction, the tenant gets 10 days to appeal. If the tenant doesn't appeal, then you have 10 days to post their door and say, "We're going to evict you, physically remove you." And you get a constable there and you change the locks, and if they're in there, you remove them. We've done it 8 times with her. And every time, she gets someone to pay her rent. And we let her back in. I will work with that woman because it's my property. I know the value of having that rent come in because she's going to pay. It's unbelievable why she does this. I don't understand it. But I collect that rent. Otherwise, if I finally get rid of her, then I'm going to have to put probably $15,000 into that place.
Wow.
Just because it needs carpet, paint. It's probably going to need a kitchen.
8 years, yeah.
So I just work with her. But we evict her as soon as she gets behind. And she gets behind and she gets locked out and she comes through, and it's just a process that we deal with.
And in a way, isn't it, I've always heard a saying, it's better to deal with the demons that you know than the demons that you don't know. And in a way, over 8 years, you've kind of probably built some sort of, rapport with her, that you do kind of know her little quirks, and that, eventually you get the money. But
Yeah, she's a nice lady. She's not a problem tenant, other than she doesn't pay her rent and I have to evict her. But it's not like it's part of a row house complex. I own one of them. So it's not like all the neighbors are complaining about her. If there was some drug dealing going on or some really bad things are happening, I would not let her come back. I would say, "You're out," and then I'll deal with it. But if that's not the case. Now, some tenants are the opposite, and they are just problem tenants, and I just want them gone.
Good.
At all cost. Now, some of our owners, it's one of the things I ask our owners, or maybe I neglect to ask, but financially, you shouldn't get into being a landlord if you don't have some sort of safety net, some sort of money set aside. Because sometimes you just get a really bad tenant, and you're afraid to get rid of them. And you just can't be afraid to get rid of a tenant. If the tenant's not paying and you've given them every opportunity, after 30 days they're still haven't caught up and they haven't been on a payment plan, then we start the eviction process. That means we file at the magistrate level. It costs a certain amount of money to file. then the magistrate gets the fee along with the form, and they send a letter to us and they send a letter to the tenant that here's your court date. Then we get a court date. Go to the court hearing. We typically win because if the tenant's not paying rent, it's pretty obvious why we're evicting them.
Right.
Now, tenants will use certain things like they'll call the health. Here's what will happen a lot. They'll call the health department like a week before the eviction. The health department's kind of caught on to that now, and they'll ask us, hey, we notice your tenant has filed a complaint. Are they being evicted? And we say,
nice.
As a matter of fact, they are. Isn't that something, huh? So a lot of tenants will use the health department card.
Okay.
And it can cause you problems. It can cause you problems. That's why buying, in a lower income area or a house that's old and it's in disrepair, you're going to have these issues, and those are things you're going to have to live with.
What are the biggest things that typically would red flag that somebody could use against you or any landlord for health department reasons, just to kind of so people know what to kind of look out for? And
anything. They'll just, literally, like we had one lady, she had some mold in her bathroom. And she called the building inspector, and the building inspector went over there and said, "You got some mold in your bathroom. Why don't you just clean it?" Yeah. But the problem is that here's the thing: she already initiated this process. So now the building inspector goes out. It's like but that's part of it. Right. What are you supposed to do as an owner or a property manager? Just ignore it?
Right.
We had to send someone out to look at it, just to make sure it wasn't an issue. Because I just told you a minute ago that we had an email from a lady who, as far as I know, was never even a problem. And just out of the blue, she says, the mold levels are super high in my house. What are you going to do about it? I don't know. I just found out about it.
Yeah, I didn't know.
How about if we I'll get you in touch with the owner and the property manager. We'll go from there. So problem tenants. So what do you do with a tenant like that who has a mold issue? You have to weigh the pros and cons of that. If they really want to put their foot down and dig their heels in, then you're going to have to take proper steps to get that fixed.
Right.
And then sometimes they don't let you into the house to repair it. We've had that problem. Literally, we send the repairman over, and they're like, "Okay, we're here to fix." "Oh, you can't come in now. It's not appropriate right now." Yeah. So you would think, like in a perfect world, it's not supposed to work that way. You call the tenant, they say, "Oh yeah, here was my complaint. Thanks for sending somebody over." They're there. They let the repairman in, the repairman does his job, and everybody lives happily ever after. We get tenants that it's not convenient right now. You have to come on an evening or a weekend. And we're like, no, we're not coming on an evening or a weekend. We're going to use the key and come in, or you're going to be there.
Right.
Because we have a right to do so. So when you get tenants like that, those are the ones you don't want to work with.
Right.
Those are the ones that you won't bend over backwards for because they're just unreasonable people.
Yes.
That's why it's important to do your due diligence up front to make sure you're putting in the best quality tenant you can. But again, it goes back to if you're in a depressed area, higher crime, low average household income, not too many people want to live there. Right. So you don't get the doctors and the attorneys and the accountants and the engineers who are moving in there. Right. You just don't. So you have to deal with what that economic area, just socially, whatever, is going to give you to live in your house. Yep. You have to pick the best of that you can.
Right.
But that's what you deal with. That's why a lot of times we don't take on properties that are in like really bad neighborhoods because it's a challenge, man. You work 10 times as hard and it's not worth it. Right. Financially, it's not a good business decision in my opinion, to buy in those areas and as a management company owner to manage properties in those areas because it's a no-win. We can't win.
Right. Okay.
All right. So now, a tenant gets behind. Here's our process when they're behind on rent. We're just talking about rent. We're not talking about health department issues. We're not talking about all the other issues that can come up that will pretty much blow your mind. Talking about not paying your rent. So if they're not, like for example, I worked with a girl last week. And I just bought the property. She hadn't paid rent for 3 months. Okay? You're probably asking, well, why the hell did you let her? Because it's dead of winter. And her place is dirty. Okay? She's very dirty. So if I get rid of her, the dead of winter, what am I stuck with? I'm stuck with the heat bills, and I'm stuck with a house that's filthy, and I was gonna let it ride until now. So we started